Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you to the NASA Women in Action Women in STEM event at Goddard Space Flight Center here in Greenbelt, Maryland. I am Dr. Crystal Johnson, the Deputy Center Director for Technology and Research Investments here at Goddard. And first of all, we've had a morning of exciting activities for the young girls here with us in the audience. Would you agree with that, young ladies? All right, thank you. We're happy that you're here. Thank you. We are very excited here at Goddard to present this event to you on this special day in NASA's history, as well as Goddard Space Flight Center. Over 90 years, no, exactly, 90 years ago today, on March 16, 1926, a rocket built by Robert H. Goddard lifted off and forever changed the scope of scientific exploration and our way of life. This moment led to the birth of NASA 30 years later. Now more than ever, the pursuit of those kinds of moments of innovation is key to our future. The development of world-class talent in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics remains critical to the country's global leadership. So here at NASA, we understand that fostering an open and diverse scientific community that draws from an array of unique experiences and viewpoints is a very necessary step to realizing this goal. In addition, STEM technological breakthroughs here at NASA and all over the world. Increasing opportunities for women in these fields is an important step towards realizing greater economic success and equality for women across the board. Today, we'd like to share with you some of the stories of the leading women in NASA who embody this ideal. You can follow us on this dialogue on social media using @NASAWomen, and then you can also ask us questions using #AskNASAWomen. I now have the honor of introducing our keynote speaker, Dr. Jo Handelsman. Jo is that's okay. Jo is the Associate Director for Science at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. She was appointed to that position by the President Obama and confirmed by Senate in June of 2014. She advises the President on the implications of science for the nation, how science can inform national policy, and on the federal efforts to support scientific research. Before joining the White House, she worked as a professor at Yale University and the University of Wisconsin in Madison. Dr. Handelsman is an expert in communication among bacteria that associate with soil, plants, and insects, and helped pioneer the field of metagenomics, which bridges agriculture and medicine. Dr. Handelsman is also recognized for her research on science education and women and minorities in science and received the Presidential Award for Excellence in Science Mentoring in 2011. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Jo Handelsman.
Well, good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. And thank you for that lovely introduction. It's a real honor to be here. I've never been to Goddard before, so I'm quite excited and hoping for an invitation to come back and see more. This is one of my favorite activities in Women's History Month because it's particularly important to recognize the women who in earlier times weren't recognized for what they did. And although women have been important to the fulfillment of NASA's mission throughout its history, they haven't always been recognized for their accomplishments. President Obama changed that just a few months ago when he awarded Katherine Johnson, a great NASA mathematician, with the Medal of Freedom in December of 2015. And since then, Katherine Johnson has become something of a sensation in science and technology, as she should have been all along. And she's finally becoming recognized as one of the so-called female calculators, or as I read unpleasantly in one place, the computers with skirts, which didn't sound so flattering. And she did the math that sent Alan Shepard and John Glenn and the first Apollo astronauts into space. The story has it that John Glenn wouldn't take off in space until Katherine had checked the math because he wanted to make sure that it was right so he could get back. And she worked on virtually every major NASA space mission for many, many years, from Mercury through the shuttle. And she also literally wrote the textbook on rocket science. Recently, we just found out at the White House that Taraji P. Henson is going to play Katherine Johnson in a forthcoming film. So she really has hit the big time and is being recognized. That's real change from the way she was ignored before. If any of you have seen some of the great old films of that era of early space missions, you know that women didn't play a very large role in those films except as wives of astronauts. And I hope somebody remakes the story of space with Katherine Johnson at the center. And it sounds like that may be what we're in store for. But today, things are somewhat different. Girls have all sorts of great role models. The astronauts Sally Ride and Mae Jemison, Kathy Sullivan and Ellen Ochoa, who's here today. I mean, that's also real change, that we actually have female astronauts to look up to. You also have incredible leadership at NASA among the women. We have the NASA Deputy Administrator, Dava Newman, and Chief Scientist Ellen Stofan, who provide incredible leadership throughout the agency. And they lead teams of scientists, including many, many women and engineers who are pushing the boundaries of science, and in so doing, pushing the boundaries of our universe. So today I want to thank, just personally from me and on behalf of the White House, I want to thank all the great women at NASA who are doing wonderful and great, important work, not only in their science, but to inspire young people and young women particularly to be explorers and innovators and the next generation of astronauts, no matter what their background and where they come from. When I was young, I looked kind of longingly at telescopes. I thought they were really cool looking, but I never looked through one because I thought telescopes were just for boys. That was the era I grew up in. So instead, I kind of hoped one day I'd have a telescope. I'm still hoping. One day maybe I will. But I found instead that microscopes were something that girls did use, because I had a female teacher in 7th grade. She taught me how to use a microscope, so it seemed like the natural thing for a girl to use a microscope. And so since I was about 12 years old, I've been glued to the oculars of a microscope when I'm not doing anything else. And those are important moments for me throughout my history as a scientist, particularly as a teenager. And I think it has an interesting parallel with space, because the tiny little universe of microbes that we can't see with the eye, because although they're near us, they're very, very small, has an interesting similarity to the great objects in space that we also can't see very well with the naked eye, but of course that's because they're far away and large. And so I'd say that microbiology is the inverse of astronomy, so perhaps I sort of got to look through a telescope inversely. So things have changed since I was a girl. And I hope that many of the girls in this room today would be appalled to think that a telescope was only for a boy, that was just something that never entered your mind. And perhaps the best illustration of that change is that half of the recent astronaut class was women. So that's big change, but we still have more to do. There are still too many little girls who grow up thinking that they can't do something, or someone tells them you can't do something because they're a girl. And particularly in engineering and other fields of the quantitative sciences, like astronomy and computer science, it's been very hard for girls to get into these fields, in part because there haven't been enough women to provide role models. It's hard to imagine you yourself doing something if you haven't seen someone who looks like you doing that same thing. Women still occupy a minority of jobs in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, or STEM. 29% of the jobs are filled by women, and 37% of STEM college graduates are women. And sadly, that's skewed by field. And my field, biology, is very rich with women, but many other fields have way fewer than 29% of their jobs being filled by women. And in some fields, like computer science and engineering, in the last few decades, the proportion of women in majors in those fields in college has actually gone down. We have to fix that. That's important change as well. The president has said over and over that improving STEM outcomes for all students is one of the most important things we can do to ensure a prosperous, secure, and sustainable future for our country. And he's acted on that in many, many ways. A big part of that goal means helping to increase access for women and girls who want to enter STEM fields. And those fields are important to get them into because those represent well-paying jobs, exciting and rewarding careers, and those jobs contribute to our national global competitiveness. So the president's focus on increasing women in STEM is not just the right thing to do, but our economic future depends on it because we need more and talented STEM workers, and we need to draw them from whatever groups they're part of, based on their talent and not whether they're just boys or the traditional-looking scientists of the past. We know a few things from education research of the last few decades about what drives people away from STEM fields and also what helps them to succeed and what inspires them. And in particular, girls and certain minority groups respond to different kinds of teaching. So the first thing we have to do is change the way we teach STEM in the classroom. And that's throughout, from kindergarten all the way through graduate school. The changes we need to make involve getting people actively involved, engaging with the material, discovering, engineering things, creating things, and not just reading about things in a textbook that other people have either discovered or invented. Those are good teaching techniques for everyone, but they have a differentially positive effect on women and minorities. So if we start incorporating real-world problems into our classrooms and hands-on research, we'll be breeding scientists in a completely new way. We'll be raising a generation of scientists who come to us, even by the time they get to college, understanding what science is, what engineering is, what it means to participate, to be a scientist or an engineer, and not just look from the outside. And that's a really, really important change. The other aspect of what we do in our classrooms that has to change is we need to make connections between the science and technology that we teach and the real world that it affects. And there's evidence that girls and minorities have a greater drive to serve their communities and to serve the global community in their jobs, and their career choices are driven by this more than for white men and boys. And so as a result, we're depriving all students from understanding those connections, but particularly depriving girls and minorities who may decide not to go into STEM careers because they don't see that connection to making the world a better place. And in fact, STEM is all about making the world a better place. It's the pursuit of knowledge, but it's also knowledge for the benefit of humankind. So that's an important first step that my office is working on, is trying to change the way that we teach. But it goes beyond the classroom. Another change we need is to change the image of STEM in our media. And we know that entertainment media has all sorts of effects on what people, both consciously and unconsciously, plan to do, think to do, and end up actually doing. And so we need to work to change the images to make STEM a field that is populated in fictional media with the kind of people who really do STEM, which is a tremendous variety of women and minorities and people from all walks of life. So that's why it was very exciting to hear recently that this movie about Katherine Johnson is being made, because that's one of our goals in my office, is to begin to see some change in the way STEM and people who do STEM are represented, to include a broader range of our students and ultimately aspiring scientists and engineers. And the third thing is we need to remove barriers from our educational institutions so that we don't present artificial reasons for women and minorities to get turned away from STEM. And some of that is just institutional structures, like how we plan people's lives according to male reproductive calendars and not female calendars. and many other things that have been focused on for decades for men that aren't a benefit to women, and vice versa, things that women need in order to be integrated into the academic STEM community, but just isn't provided. We need to take the role of women in academic science throughout, from kindergarten through graduate school and employment. We need to take that role very seriously and realize that if we don't draw on all of the talent in this country, and at least half of it comes from women, we're not experiencing we won't experience the kind of growth and creativity and innovation that our country has always thrived upon. I think there's some evidence that diversity is actually one of the things that has separated our country in innovation from all other countries. We're always looked to as the most innovative country, and we're the envy of the world for that, with our science and technology just leading the world. And many countries have tried to copy our system, and they've tried to copy our educational system. They've tried to create liberal arts colleges, which are something very special to the United States. They've looked at our business models and tried to copy our companies. But I would assert that the one thing that is the most important to innovation in this country that people can't copy from the outside is our diversity. And there's scientific evidence to back that up. There's a lot of evidence to say that diverse groups actually function much better and are more creative and produce better outcomes, more creative and innovative outcomes, than more uniform or homogeneous groups. And so these companies in Silicon Valley that you hear about that are almost all white men are doing themselves an enormous disservice by excluding women and minorities who could be enriching the conversation and the dialogue and the creativity of everyone there. But as a nation, perhaps not in every company, but as a nation, we are uniquely diverse, and we need to not only treasure that and use it for benefit, but we need to make sure that people know that diversity is not something that we do because we should do it. We take care of our diversity because that is what America is, and that's what makes us great. And we need to live that and work toward a new model of STEM where diversity is valued and encouraged and not seen as an extra. So to the young women here, who I hope are tomorrow's leaders in STEM, I say live your dreams, go after them, think about what you want to do, whether it's discovering a star or traveling to a planet. I say go for it and imagine yourself doing whatever it is that anyone can do. Even if you don't see someone who looks just like you doing what you imagine, that's okay. You could be the first. And if someone tells you you can't do that, your answer should be, yes, I can. And that's the only answer you should consider, because you can do anything. And to the senior women of NASA, I want to again thank you for the great work you've done and the leadership you've given to the entire effort to bring a more diverse community into the STEM fields and to be role models for the next generation. And so I'm looking forward to our afternoon, and I thank you all for being here, and have fun.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Handelsman, for your thoughts, sharing your thoughts with us here today. Just a little reminder, you are watching NASA's Women in Action event live from NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center. To ask us any questions, please remember to use hashtag AskNASA on social media. Okay, so now here to take those questions once you send them in, we have 4 of our NASA leaders that are going to be answering those questions for you. Please help me in welcoming, first of all, Dr. Dava Newman. She is our Deputy NASA Administrator, and along with Administrator Charles Bolden, Dr. Newman is responsible for providing overall leadership, planning, and policy direction for our agency. Have a seat. Next, Lesa Rowe, our Deputy Associate Administrator. And as the Deputy Associate Administrator, she assists the Associate Administrator in performing the Chief Operations Officer duties for the agency and leads several key agency initiatives. And next we have Dr. Ellen Stofan. NASA's chief scientist. She is the principal advisor to the Administrator Bolden on the agency's science programs and science-related strategic planning and investments. And then Dr. Ellen Ochoa from Johnson Space Flight Center. She is the director of Johnson Space Flight Center, and as a former astronaut, she flew aboard 2 missions on Discovery and 2 aboard Atlantis. She is the first Hispanic woman ever to fly in space. Okay. You may have a seat. Okay, so I will be moderating the panel for these ladies today, and if we could first start with Dr. Dava Newman and give a brief introduction, a 1-minute introduction on yourselves. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Hello. Hello out there. We got to jazz it up here. I am thrilled to be here. I mean, women in STEM. Joe, thank you so much for that inspiring talk. It's just, that's what we're here to do, is celebrate, acknowledge the work we have to do, and do it all together. So I am Dava Newman, former academic. Real quick bio. I was a girl who grew up in Helena, Montana, looking at big sky country, dreaming about the stars. I have to say the Apollo program was very influential when I was a young girl, and it taught me that we could dream and we could send people to the moon, and I've been focused on sending people to Mars. Not ever since. When I was in high school at your age, I loved basketball and skiing, and thank goodness, science and math. I've kind of enhanced STEM to call it STEAMed. I love STEM. My whole career has been looking at this, but I bring in the arts because all I know is the artists, the storytellers. They tell my story. They tell us, how we're going to get to Mars. And the D, I was meeting with some young ladies at lunch. I said, how many of you are 3D makers? You know what? Almost the whole table had some design experience. So you're in. So I'm here to tell you that you're all in, because we need every single one of you. And fast forward from early career in Montana, my family also hails from California. I went to the Midwest. I'd never been there before. A lot of cornfields. And so I went to Notre Dame and became an aerospace engineer. But first I was a pre-law major. What's that? My brother gave me great advice and said, you're good at science and math, and do something like that. Oh, I didn't even know. It's called engineering. Well, it all worked out well. And from there, I went to graduate school to MIT and did aerospace engineering, did technology and policy, because I was wondering, how do they make those crazy decisions in Washington? Well, be careful what you wish for, because 30 years later, you might be sitting in this seat and still trying to figure out, how we can make the best decisions for the future. So just came down last year to join NASA, and I just have to say, I'm humbled, I'm honored, because it's the NASA women, it's the NASA team that I've been able to join, and I think I have the best job in the world.
Awesome. Lesa.
Well, I am delighted to be here as well. I had a great conversation learning about all that is going on in our high schools in engineering. And I was just thrilled to hear about the different programs, the aerospace program that's actually happening there. As Crystal said, I am the Deputy Chief Operating Officer, whereas Dava is the Deputy Chief Executive Officer of NASA. I'm the Deputy Chief Operating Officer, and really that's focused on the operations across all of NASA's 10 centers, and really the missions and the operations that are going on. I've been fortunate enough to work at 4 of NASA's centers in my career, and one of those being NASA Langley, where I was the center director, the very first woman center director in 100 years at NASA Langley.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great thing.
And I was able to do that for 9 years. It was just a really exciting time. Also, I have been very fortunate and worked at the Johnson Space Center and the Kennedy Space Center, where I worked on the International Space Station, delivering the very first research to the International Space Station as it was up and getting going. And over both of those centers have worked 38 shuttle flights, 38 shuttle missions, and various positions along the way. So it's been a very exciting career in being able to do all of that. I am most proud of my 3 children, and you guys be sure and tell them that, because I also am an electrical engineer and the very, very first in my family to graduate from college. So I'm very proud of the background that I've had and the exciting time that I've had in NASA. So I'll turn it over.
Thank you.
So I'm Ellen Stofan. As the chief scientist of NASA, I get to look across all of the science that we do at NASA, from studying the sun to studying the universe, the study that we do of the planets of our solar system, to studying our favorite planet, which is the Earth. I hope you guys all agree that's our favorite planet, to the work that we do every day up on the International Space Station, trying to understand the effects of microgravity on humans. Now, the connection across all those different areas of science is the fact that at NASA, we want to send humans to Mars. And not just any humans. We're going to need scientists, engineers, to be those first people to walk on the surface of Mars. And you guys are just about the right age to become some of our first Mars astronauts. So you have a lot of work to do to get ready. In about 20 years, NASA will be ready to send you. So I'm a planetary geologist. So I study volcanoes around the solar system, volcanoes here on Earth, on Venus, on Mars, and I also study the surface of one of Saturn's moons called Titan, where it actually rains liquid methane and ethane onto the surface, sort of like liquid gasoline falling from the sky, an amazing place. So planetary geology is fun, and I got into it because I'm a NASA brat. My father worked for NASA. My mother was a science teacher. This didn't affect my sister. She became an attorney. But I always loved science. And you know what? No one ever told me that I couldn't. And I think that's an important thing that we want to talk to you guys about here today.
Awesome.
Good afternoon. I'm happy to be here. My college degree is in physics, and I have a doctorate in electrical engineering. And the first few years of my career, I was studying about optical information processing at a couple of different laboratories. And then I was fortunate enough to be selected for the astronaut program. So that really changed my life at that point. And I spent a number of years in the astronaut office, had a chance to fly on 4 space shuttle missions, and may have a chance to talk about that a little bit more as we go through today's session. After my 4 flights, I ended up going into management and leadership positions at Johnson Space Center. Johnson, of course, is one of the NASA centers. You can see the whole list over there just to the right of the podium. And Johnson's really involved in human spaceflight, in particular human spacecraft, all the way from design through operation, as well as the training and preparation of the astronauts, of all the people who work in mission control and really carrying out the operation. So a very exciting place to be. At one point, I was leading head of the flight crew operations, which is the organization that manages the astronaut office and our aircraft ops division. And now I'm actually the center director there, representing a group of incredibly talented people as we're doing human spaceflight.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the first question for you ladies, if you can think back to when you were their age, back in high school, what did you like to do back in high school, and what did you envision your career would be like, and how does that compare to where you actually are today?
Okay, so I'll start. As I mentioned, so back when I was in your shoes, I was an explorer. I think I just always loved exploring. I was, the kid running up in the mountains, and because I always wondered what was, literally over the horizon or up on top of the mountain from where I grew up. But just enjoying, high school and thinking about college. Being from Helena, Montana, that's the capital, but still felt small. So I was ready to go out to college and leave the state and explore things. And I thought that, actually, initially when I was a teenager, that maybe I'd be a lawyer. I was going to be a sports lawyer to tie the two together. So I was going to represent Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. You guys don't know who that is, but Lou Alcindor, he was my hero. And I was never going to be 7.5 feet tall, and I could never slam dunk. But I did end up at Notre Dame and played basketball for a few years. And I was taking all the courses freshman year. I still wasn't, didn't know what my final major was going to be. And it had to do with the national policies and politics and things like that. I paid attention. I said, well, space policy, I was so keen on exploration, said we need to do this for peaceful human purposes. And so by sophomore year, that's when I chose my major of aerospace engineering. Now, I didn't know what an engineer was, so it's okay if you don't. I didn't really know any engineers. So again, when I got the chance to be a faculty member at MIT, I wrote a freshman engineering book, interactive aerospace and design. So I say, boy, I wish my 17, 18-year-old self needed to know what that was. But that's kind of doesn't you don't have to have it all planned out. You can zig and zag and do a little bit of that.
Well, let's see. Back when I was in your age in high school, I was at Gainesville, Florida. So besides watching the Gators play football, they were better back then. I was pretty good in math and science, and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And there was the community college had offered something at our high school where you could put in your interests. And I knew I liked to travel as well, and had some interest in. And out popped zoology and engineering. So with that, and when I looked at the salaries of those two things, I decided engineering would be a better choice. And so I didn't have any idea what an engineer was, but I applied to the University of Florida, got in, and discovered along the way. Started to realize what different kind of engineering was. I thought I wanted to be an environmental engineer, and took a course immediately, an intro to environmental engineering, and discovered I did not want to be an environmental engineer. But I was pretty good at electrical engineering, and it seemed like that was where my talents lied, and so that's where I ended up in electrical engineering. Again, not necessarily knowing what that is. As Dava explained, I don't think you have to have it all planned out, but I was able to get into a co-op program at NASA and come down and work at NASA one semester and then go back to college every other semester. And in that, I discovered that this is what engineers do, and I love it. And there was really exciting things going on. So started to realize it's something that I actually could do. So in all of that, I was able to make my desires as an early high school student, which I really wanted. The thing I could visualize is really traveling the world and making a difference. And I truly think that having that career in NASA has paid off, that I really have been able to make the difference that I always envisioned. Not only kind of traveled the world with things I've done on the International Space Station, but talk about working on the world. NASA certainly has that vantage point, not only there and kind of our universe and beyond. So I've had a tremendous career and being able to achieve the vision I had in high school.
When I was a younger kid, I was the kid that was always picking up rocks. In fact, even today, my husband says, do we have to have rocks in every room of the house? And the answer to that is actually yes. And I think it was around late middle school, early high school, where I realized there was this thing called a geologist, where people got paid for picking up rocks. And I thought, okay, that sounds like a great career to me. And then around that same time, NASA landed the 2 Viking landers on the surface of Mars. And I thought, geology plus Mars, what could be better than that? But I will say in high school, I was mostly kind of focused on skiing, focused on doing fun things. I thought math was a trial, but I knew I had to work at it, because if I wanted to be a scientist, if I wanted to be a geologist, I actually knew that math was a tool that I had to overcome. So I took math classes. I tried to challenge myself. I took some computer programming classes so I would learn how to use computers. I didn't love it, but I knew I needed to learn it. And I always liked science classes, so I knew I was going to go down that path. But I think the thing is, just because you think, well, I can't be a scientist if I'm not good at math, or I don't love physics, so I can't be a scientist or an engineer. But you just have to say, I'm going to get through this, I'm going to stick with my goal, I'm going to stick with my dream, and I'm going to make it happen.
Great, thank you.
Well, in high school, I had no idea what I would want to do as a career. I would say the classes I enjoyed the most were my literature classes and also my math classes. And I did get a chance to take some calculus in high school, although we didn't have any kind of engineering classes there. The big activity I was in was music. I played the flute. I was in the concert band, the marching band. I played in the Civic Youth Orchestra of San Diego and thought about majoring in music. But I really knew kind of in my heart of hearts that was a really hard thing to do, to actually have a career in. So I've continued to play all my life, but didn't actually major in it. So I went off to San Diego State, again, was thinking about music, maybe business, ended up looking into journalism, computer science. I changed my major 5 times. So if you don't know what you want to do right now, you are in good company. But it was really through a couple of different things that got me interested in physics. One of them was through my math classes. As I mentioned, I had always liked math. I took it. I ended up finishing up the calculus series in college, and by the end of it realized I was the only one in there just taking it for fun. And talked to the other students to find out why they were in there, and they were of course all in either engineering or science, and it was part of what they needed to do. So that's one of the reasons I started to look into physics. And then there was also a conference at San Diego State University where I was in school, where they had some women scientists, engineers come and talk about their careers. And again, that was really important, like you've kind of heard from the rest of the panel. I really had no idea what an engineer did. I didn't have any concept of, okay, you get up in the morning, you go to work, what is it you're actually doing if you're an engineer or if you're a physicist? And so it was really nice to hear from these other women, what that was like. And it was really the combination of those things that got me interested in physics. And then I had a chance to have a couple of summer jobs where I worked in laboratories, and so that helped convince me that I wanted to go to graduate school, because the people who are really leading the research in the laboratories are the ones that had the advanced degrees. So I went off to Stanford and got a master's and a PhD. And the first year I was at Stanford was the year the space shuttle flew for the first time. So that was the first new spacecraft in a decade at NASA, so it was really big news. And of course also just 3 years before that there had been an astronaut selection, and that was when the first women and the first minority astronauts were selected. So that was another really big deal. And a couple years after the shuttle flew for the first time, NASA was doing another astronaut selection, and some of the other graduate students I knew were applying. And that's really when I started to think, wow, what a fantastic career that would be, and got the information from NASA and made the decision that as soon as I finished up my doctorate, I would apply to the astronaut program.
That's great. Thank you all very much. Great answers there. So all of you can kind of see from the answers that they provided here, not anybody sitting up on this stage probably knew when they were your age that they were going to end up in these positions up here on this stage. So that lets you know that there's definitely time for you to consider what it is you want to do. But each of them also talked about exposing yourselves, giving yourselves opportunity for working in the summer times and just exposing yourselves to things in the STEM career, because that's kind of what hooks you. When you're actually there physically doing it and you get a chance to see how fun it is up close and personal, it's something you never want to let go of. So now, just a reminder for those people who are on NASA TV, you are watching the NASA Women in Action event live from Goddard Space Flight Center here in Greenbelt, Maryland. We certainly want you to participate along with us, so if you have any questions, please send them to hashtag women at NASA. No, I'm sorry, Ask NASA Women. Hashtag Ask NASA Women. Okay, let's get some questions from our students. Our first question.
Hi, my name is Tiffany Jackson. I'm a senior at Duval High School, and my question is for whoever wants to answer. What qualities do you think put you above others for your position in leadership?
That is a great
Sense
question.
of humor.
Perfect.
Teamwork.
Teamwork is definitely one. Teamwork.
Yeah, I'd say in listening, consensus building.
So I think it partly starts with your education. I think that was important to all of us in getting the position that we are. And part of your early career is sort of building that credibility, showing that you can apply what you learned in school to the problem solving that is so much a part of what we do at NASA and what is done in other STEM careers. And then I would add what everybody else said as well.
Could I take the opportunity to related, just to send a message to y'all. You don't have to be the best in math and science. That's maybe what people heard, that I heard, and that tends to weed people out of the STEM fields. You don't have to be. They're important, so you need to take those, as you've heard, as tools. But don't worry about being number 1 or 2. Those, it's training, it's skills development. But again, you love the art, you love design, you love to make things. You want to help people and humankind. That's what doctors, engineers, scientists. That's what we all do. So that should be the passion. Go with that, and then don't worry about being the best. Be proficient, and then I think you'll get there. And just wanted to pass that on, because we have to call it changing the conversation. We want to change the conversation with you. You're all in. You're all super talented. You're here, and we need every single one of you.
Thank you for your question. Appreciate that. Our next question.
Hi, my name is Mikkel Chambers, and I'm a freshman at the Bryn Mawr School. My question is, how did you adjust to working in a male-dominated career field? And have you ever had to conform your personality or ideas while working in this field?
Wow, good question.
Let's see. Should we run through it? I think we should all comment on this.
I think everybody should comment on this.
So I was, it's definitely been male-dominated aerospace my whole life. I was one of two women in aerospace engineering for undergraduate, and then percentage maybe got a little bit better actually for me in graduate school, but I was the first woman faculty member down in Texas and went back onto the MIT faculty, one of 35. So I like men, that's good. Like working with everybody. But it's very noticeable, I have to say. Now over my career, when I again left the fact that we're probably 8 out of 35 women, it's really nice. You reach critical mass, and it does change things. I distinctly remember the day that I had a majority of women in my graduate course. There was a majority of women than men, and I said, wow, So things are changing, as mentioned earlier. But it's also taught me a lot. And then I would just say, but don't change yourself. You just be true to yourself, and don't let anyone change you. Things like that, and that served me well. Just trying not to. I don't have to be like them. Right. I kind of feel like the bull in the. Sometimes I cry at work, and some people would get in a fight, and that would hurt my feelings. They weren't even talking to me, and I'd cry. Oh goodness, well, that's okay.
Well, let's see. I think for me, mine has been that I don't really notice I'm a woman in the room. I'm a person on the team, and because from electrical engineering and college, I was the only. Sometimes, most of the times, the only woman in the room, or one of two, maybe, perhaps. But and it's more in hindsight that I remember that. When I was in the room, it might be just a real quick thought, but I didn't really it didn't faze me in any way. And then within NASA, I've always been one on the team. I've been one of the people on the team getting the job done, and so I've never really thought about our team as men and women or different colors of people or anything else. Right? It was just we all have a job to do, and we need all of us. We do really hard things in NASA, really amazing things that nobody else does. And so we really need that team all coming together and making it happen. And so I think that's for me, that's how it's been really good for me. And I didn't necessarily, I know some people need to see that there is a woman in the role before you feel confident in being there, perhaps. I mean, I've learned that along the way. I never did. I never thought about it that way. It just was, so I think that's for me, it really hasn't been a barrier or anything. But I think, as Ellen said, as Davis said, be yourself, and I think that's what's most important. So.
Sometimes, especially early in my career, I would be feeling like I was one of the team, and just like everybody else. And one of the men would make a comment that would make me stop and think, oh yeah, the rest of the people in this room don't look like me. And they would make me feel, oh yeah, you're a girl. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of the times, especially early in my career when I wasn't very self-confident, I would feel like I have to work twice as hard just to be taken half as seriously. But as I got more confident, as I went on in my career, and I realized they actually need me here in this room. And I now look back at people like Katherine Johnson, who, an African-American woman in the early 1960s. A lot of the time she was not made to feel welcome in the room, but people who've interviewed her, she says, I knew I belonged there. And so now, especially when I get a chance to talk to kids like you, I say, channel your inner Katherine Johnson. If anybody ever makes you feel like you don't belong in that room, remember her and say, I'm going to be like Katherine Johnson, and I'm going to feel like I belong because I do, and they actually need me here to get this work done.
Yeah, I would say it's changed a lot throughout my career. It was harder when I was young. I would say when I was in college and graduate school and early on in my career, I was often the only woman in a class or one of two, and I felt self-conscious. I felt like I stood out. And it made me a little bit reluctant to raise my hand and ask questions or to make a comment. One of the things I did to get around that when I was in school was all the professors have office hours when you're in college. And so if I had a question, I would go see a professor, and it turns out professors love it when students come talk to them. People sometimes have this idea of like, well, only people who are struggling go, and they'll think something, but actually if you talk to any professor, they actually love it when people come and talk to them, because it says, you're really interested in what they're trying to teach, and you're trying to get the most out of that class. So that was one thing that helped. Once I started working, one of the pieces of advice that a couple of my earlier supervisors told me is, hey, you have to speak up when you're meeting. That was hard for me. I don't know. I don't think it was so much that I was a woman. I was just naturally a quiet person. Didn't normally, raise my hand and talk. So that was something that I kind of needed to force myself to do a little bit earlier in my career. It has actually gotten lots and lots easier as I've gone through my career. So that's another thing that I would tell you, that if you do feel that way at the beginning, it's not always going to feel that way. And now I'm like what Lesa said, I really don't think about it at all. I'm a member of the team, and it's not something that is really part of what I think about day to day at work.
Thank you all very much for those. That was wonderful. Wonderful. Okay, now we're going to go to social media to ask questions from social media.
So we've been watching the Ask NASA Women hashtag, and please keep sending them in. We'll answer them after the show ends as well. And we got one from Khaki Flynn, and she wants to know from each panelist, what's your favorite invention?
Oh. All right. Go for it.
One of my favorite NASA inventions is two professors from MIT, one of whom is at NASA right now. They had the students up at MIT watch the Star Wars video where Luke Skywalker is training with that little ball and the lightsaber. No, we didn't invent lightsabers before you get excited. But there was a little ball that was floating around that he was practicing with. And he told his students, I want you to invent one of those. It's called Spheres. If you Google it, it flies up on the space station. Students actually get to operate it through a program called Spheres Robotics. And we're actually even using it to say, how can we use little robots like that to actually do work up on the space station? And, Dava earlier was talking about the importance of arts. And that's why arts is so critical, because you have to imagine something before you invent it. And so whether we get our ideas from science fiction or from an innovative future engineer like one of you, it's those great ideas that turn into inventions, and that's what's so important.
I don't have a favorite past one, but a favorite future one would be teleporting. Oh, I love that.
Especially on a morning. I have no favorite.
I sent my children a text, and I meant to tell them I was teleworking, and I said, and it auto-corrected to teleport, and my kid said, you guys at NASA are keeping secrets. No, it was autocorrect.
Any other favorites?
Well, I don't have a favorite, but one of the ancillary jobs that I have is I'm on the Nomination Evaluation Committee for the National Medal of Technology and Innovation. So our committee makes recommendations first to the Secretary of Commerce and then to the President. And one of the criteria is that it needs to have made a major impact on society. And so a lot of the nominations that we get are from work that was done 30 years ago, because of the fact that that inventions have now seeped into seeding companies that may now be very large multinational companies. Because of that, very few of the people that we read about are women. And so I always sit there and think, well, I certainly hope that as we're doing this 20 years from now, that we'll see a lot more women who have been involved in inventions that have now grown into companies or products or things that have a great impact on our society.
All right. One great example of that she just talked about is the jaws of life. Are you all familiar with the jaws of life that people use to cut people out of vehicles? We had to invent that as a part of NASA work because we had the impossible task of trying to cut metal on the International Space Station in a weightless environment. So we developed it for that and transferred it to private industry. So we're saving lives every day when people get in those accidents and the cars are all mangled up and you have to have people cut out of the vehicles. So the next question that I have for you, lady, well, first of all, in the audience here, we have many girls here, and they talked to you about where they were when they were in your seats in high school. How many of you have thought about what it is you want to do when you become an adult, a full adult? Are any of you interested in STEM fields already? Yay, look at all these hands, STEM-related fields. So one thing that I'd like to ask of the panel members, what one piece of advice would you give to the young girls out there who are interested, or not even yet interested, but who are thinking about STEM-related careers? What one piece of advice would you offer them?
Mine's simple. You can do it. They're the most fun fields. I'm very biased, but I say go for it, and you can absolutely do it, and you'll never regret it. You'll never look back.
I think I completely agree with what David said. Mainly, don't let fear get in your way.
There you go.
That's a normal feeling. It means you're doing something that's hard, and it's okay. It means you're challenging yourself. So don't let fear stop you from doing things.
You know, the STEM fields are a tool that we use to help make the world a better place, whether it's studying climate change, whether it's inventions that spin off from NASA that help us clean water in developing countries around the world. So please go into STEM, because we have all these challenges in front of us, from climate change to getting humans to Mars, to living in this very technological world. So I really want you guys to stick with it, follow your dreams, and become an engineer or a scientist.
Wonderful.
I would say make sure you keep your options open, and that has a lot to do with classes you're taking in high school and then what you end up taking in college. You know, it's important not to narrow down too soon and to realize your interests may change, the world may change, and if you have some of that behind you, you have so much more options available to you.
Great. Well, I'd like to thank you panel members so much for joining us here for this NASA Women in Action activity. Thank you all so much in the audience for joining us, and thank you for all of you out there at NASA, on the NASA TV for joining us. I'd also like to thank Dr. Joe Handelsman for joining us. We really appreciate you coming and taking the time to be with us today. And for those of you who out there who missed it or you came in late, don't worry. We've actually recorded this. You can watch this on NASA TV at nasa.gov/NASA TV. Thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate it.